is anonymous or non-anonymous egg donation, the pros and cons explained. So thank you so much for attending tonight. We're really pleased to have you here. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. I'm Sheila, and I'm going to be your host this evening. And with me tonight is Dr. Rocío Núñez, who is the scientific advisor at UR Vistahermosa in Spain. So good evening to you, Dr. Rocío. How are you tonight?
Good evening. Fine, thank you.
Good to hear. So we're really grateful for you coming to do this presentation tonight. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting, and I hope everyone who's here enjoys it. And there will be time for, so Dr. Rocío will go through a presentation first, and then afterwards I will be asking any questions that you have. So please type your questions in the chat section during the presentation. Any question you like. It could be about the presentation, or it can be about egg donation in general. And if you do have a question that you would rather it wasn't asked during the presentation, or during the event rather, please do contact Dr. Rocío herself at her clinic or her team, and they will be more than happy to help you at any time. So the event is being recorded as well. So if you can't stay for the whole of it, or you're interrupted halfway through, then it will be available on my IVF Answers website for you to go and watch and listen to at another time. So just before I hand over to Dr. Rocío and her presentation, I'll just briefly share my egg donation story. So as I said, I'm Sheila Lamb. And after a 6-year infertility journey, I became a mum through egg donation at a Spanish clinic when I was 47. It actually wasn't at Dr. Rocío's clinic. There are a lot in Spain. But obviously that was where we went. So our daughter is now 11 years old. And I'm sure, like I had the worry about having a child through egg donation, and would I bond with any child? Would I love that child? Would that child love me? I can honestly, absolutely honestly tell you that I couldn't love her any more than if she had been born with my own eggs. And I cannot imagine life without her. It was love at first sight when I saw her as a 6-cell, 2-day-old embryo. So it was our second donor cycle. The first cycle ended in an early miscarriage at 6 weeks pregnancy. So because I was then almost 46, we decided that we needed to do our next cycle quite quickly afterwards. So that was the real reason for us going with a different donor. That was the only reason, because it would have been too soon for the same donor to donate again. Dealing with infertility, doing IVF, having a miscarriage, and then looking to a donation to have our family was, as you know, emotionally hard and lonely. Back then, there weren't many people sharing their stories. I didn't know anyone who had used an egg donor to have a child. But thankfully, I think you'll all agree that there is a lot more information and a lot more people sharing their story as a recipient parent, sharing their story as a donor, and also sharing their story as a donor-conceived person. And all this really, really does help when you're on this journey. So I highly recommend connecting with people who are open and are willing to talk about their journey. I'm passionate, I hope you can tell that, about supporting others going through their journey to parenthood, and also for raising awareness of infertility and loss in order to reduce the taboo and shame that are around both these subjects. I've always been extremely open with anyone who'll listen to my story. Because I think it is so really important, especially for people who are on their journey now, but also for children who were born as a result of IVF and donor conception. those pictures of those books, those are 5 books that I've put together. They're all stories, collections of true life stories. IVF, pregnancy loss, baby loss, and who are now pregnant after infertility loss, and all the people who have written their stories. As I say, they've had their own experience, and they share emotional impact, because that doesn't change over the years. It's doesn't matter whether it was 20 years ago or you're going through it now. The emotions are still the same. Yes, I am always happy to talk to anyone about my experience, and I can be contacted in various different ways. So please don't be shy. No question's a silly question, and I've been through it, so I do know what it's like, as I say. So that's a little bit about me, but I will have the pleasure now of handing you over to Dr. Rocío for her presentation on anonymous or non-anonymous egg donation. That's such a mouthful. The pros and cons explained. So over to your good self, and I'll speak to you later.
Thank you, Sheila, for sharing with us your story. It's very interesting, very useful. And about all yours. So I'm going to talk about anonymous or non-anonymous egg donation. I think it's a very exciting topic and very controversial. And first of all, you see in this slide that around a half of egg donation cycles, according to the latest data published by European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology, around half of egg donation cycles were carried out in Spain, as you see in the slide in blue. And one of the most controversial issues in egg donation is anonymity or not anonymity. And the situation is very diverse in the different countries, which makes the Council of Europe. You see in the slide in blue, dark blue, countries where anonymity is mandatory, and in green, where there is not anonymity, and in yellow, the countries where there are a mixed system. And although most egg donation treatments in the world are made anonymously, a growing number of countries have questioned the morality of anonymity. So laws are being enacted to allow children born by gamete donation to identify the donors. And in this sense, Council of Europe published a draft for changing the legislation in a European scale, raising with a series of legal, ethical, and clinical problems discussed in this document to be debated in the Parliamentary Assembly. In Spain, oocyte donation is anonymous. And you see through the years the number of egg donation cycles in Spain. And according to the latest data published by the Spanish Register through the Spanish Fertility Society, in the 2019 were carried out 35,728 egg donation cycles, and more than 10,000 cycles were from patients from other countries. Because of the quality of the centers, because the favorable legislation in Spain. Moreover, some countries import gametes from Spain to carry out the treatments in their countries. And in Spain, these treatments are well regulated and well managed, both for patients and for donors. And this law established that only centers authorized by the competent health authorities and following strict control of the confidentiality of donor data will participate in this selection. And regarding the selection of the donors, the law is very strict, and the donors undergo a general assessment and several tests. They must be young women under 35 years old. They must be healthy and undergo not only medical assessment, also familiar background, and it's also mandatory psychological assessment. And they undergo several tests, the ovarian reserve test, the general analysis, including serological and microbiological test, genetic test, and a panel with recessive disease called a Curry genetic test. And moreover, in our UR centers, we have a DNA donors bank, just in case we need in the future to locate the donor. And we also use a new technology called PhenoMatch, with which a donor phenotypically the same as the recipient is chosen. This new technology enable us to guarantee not only the compatibility between the donor and the recipient, but also that the biophysical and biometric characteristic will be maximum. But what is more important, all parties involved, donor and recipient, will be informed of the result obtained in accordance with the provision of law. And this information must be as complete as possible. And but what do patients think about anonymity? Of course, we don't know what children think about anonymity, but regarding this aspect, we conducted a study involving all the UR clinics or UR centers in Spain, and including the patients who undergo an egg donation cycle. So 66 patients anonymously completed a questionnaire, and they were asked about their sociodemographic characteristics, their opinions concerning secrecy or disclosure of the method of conception toward the child, the type of information that the child have access to, identified or not identified, and whether they intend to inform the child and relatives about his or her origin. And here we are, the results. 82% of homosexual couples have the idea to tell their children that they have been conceived with gamete donation, whereas 61% of heterosexual couples won't tell their children that they have conceived with gamete donation. The patients don't want to know the identity of the donor. They don't consider that knowledge about the origin of the gametes is important to a child, and they think that it is not necessary for the child to know the identity of the donor. So to sum up with this study, most patients who undergo treatment with donated gametes in Spain consider that their children should not know the identity of donor. This problem, anonymity versus disclosure, ultimately is an ethical issue. So here on, I'm going to deal with this issue from an ethical point of view. And the main criticisms of the anonymity of gamete donation focus on the primary interest of children born by gamete donation and the right of the child to know their biological origins. On the other hand, the people who support the anonymity argue that this practice respects the interests of the donor and their privacy, and the parents' wishes in determining what is the best interest of the child. And from an ethical point of view, in addition to the children born by gamete donation, there are other moral agents that should be taken in consideration. Of course, the patient, the couple, but also family, friends, society, donors, and the medical team. And reflecting concern about the anonymity of gamete donation, Spanish Fertility Society convened a focus group with key figures in ethics, law, psychology, and reproductive medicine to identify these scientific, psychological, legal, and ethical arguments supporting the anonymous gamete donation. And the purpose of this part of the talk is to analyze the ethical justifications which back up the right to know about genetic origins based mainly on the defense of health and the right to identity, but also considering other values which affect the different participants in the donation. Each value as a part of this issue has been analyzed, facing the extremes of the situation to reach an intermediate position, and always keeping in mind that the child's welfare requirements are a prime concern. And the moral dilemma arises when trying to determine which is the best option, anonymity or non-anonymity, without considering all values which may be harmed by choosing between one of the streams, and not just those which may affect the offspring. So, from an ethical perspective, the following values were examined: the health of babies born using donated gametes, sense of identity, autonomy of the parents, genetic inheritance, donor confidentiality, justice, responsibility, quality of donation, and economic value. And for each value, we present the arguments given to defend each stream of the situation, and to the end, intermediate course chosen. So the first value is the health of those born using donated gametes. And in favor of suppressing anonymity, argue that the right to have access to family history, to know health risks, take preventive measures, and thus have better diagnostic capability. On the other hand, in favor of anonymity, they say that people conceived by donor may share cultural and behavioral values such as lifestyle and nutritional habits, which are important for their medical history and future health. And as I explained before, explain policy explicitly indicates that donor-conceived individuals should have access to non-identifiable information about the donor, including medical information. So the intermediate course is that anonymous donation is not incompatible with offering relevant medical information, and therefore anonymity policies do not seem to frustrate the health interests of these people. In second place, sense of identity. In favor of suppressing anonymity, individuals require real data about their biological history to develop an adequate personal identity. And knowing one's genetic origins is an important component of understanding oneself. But on the other hand, although children have the right to an identity, they do not have the right to a particular type of identity. The development of the personal identity depends on interpersonal relationships with others. So, revealing the origins of children born by gamete donation may be considered as a moral obligation of the parents, without it therefore being necessary to know the identity of the donor. In the third place is autonomy of the parents and the right to privacy. And in favor of suppressing anonymity, Ken Daniels have been working for long time ago in this topic with anonymity. He defends the non-anonymity in gamete donation, and he said that secrecy has the potential to harm everyone involved. And also says that if you wish to teach children the values of honesty, openness, trust, and love, they hope can you not mirror this in your own relationship with them. But in favor of anonymity, it's necessary to consider that some parents may consider that secret to be necessary if their environment excludes their children for whatever reason. And the power to decide whether to reveal the origin to the child seems to be consistent with the value which is assigned to the parental freedom. So even children conceived by donors have the right to know this information. Anonymous gamete donation is not inconsistent with disclosure. The value of genetic inheritance. In one hand, people who do not have information about their genetic family lack something which is considered essential. But in favor of anonymity, emphasizing the importance of genetic information could promote genetic essentialism. And social forms like a family, motherhood, and fatherhood could be fundamentally determined by a biological determinism. So, if genetic connections were not imbued with such importance, perhaps parents would be less reluctant to reveal that the gametes were donated. The 5, donor confidentiality. In favor of suppressing anonymity, there is a curiosity among donors to know what their offspring is like and the right to know medical information. But curiosity does not justify the knowledge of offspring. Access to the donor's identity is not necessary. And I explained several times before, medical information is available to donors. So values such as privacy and confidentiality could be damaged both in the donor and their relatives when anonymity is exposed. 6, justice. In favor of suppressing anonymity, it is unfair that the child cannot defend his own rights for himself and above the interests of other people involved, such as the right to know his origin. And Guido Penis, who is a bioethicist and working in assisted reproduction, published a lot of papers about this topic. And he said that a very interesting sentence, if the argument of the moral right of the child to know their origins is accepted, this would have to be extended to the millions of children born naturally after a mother's adultery. If it's not extended to these cases, it would be committing an injustice since both cases are not being treated in the same way. So children whose parents have not revealed their origins would be discriminated against compared to those who do know about the donations. 7, responsibility. In favor of suppressing anonymity, the willingness of the donor to be identified and have contact with their offspring is part of this responsibility, but totally oppose this idea in favor of anonymity. The parenthood requires a responsibility which falls on the parents who are caring for and bringing up their children. So the responsibility of the donor is limited to the act of the donation and the health requirements imposed by professionals. In 8th place, the quality of donation. The suppression of anonymity in the donation of sites has led to the lack of donors and the need to resort to shared donation, for example, in Britain. And there are proven benefits, for example, discounts in medical fees, to good prognosis, ensuring patients with good quality gametes. But in favor of anonymity, in these countries where the number of donors has decreased significantly, the consequences is that the quality standards, for example, age of the donor, have been lowered when selecting donors. Another important problem, exciting patients will be faced with the dilemma of being identified, of being unable to undergo treatment. So the decrease in the quality of donation entails a new problem regarding the revelation of donor identity. And the last value, economic value, in favor of suppressing anonymity. Although there may be a drop in the number of donors, as has happened in countries where anonymity has been suppressed, this decline has now been reversed. And the economic damage that may occur because of the removal of anonymity is not above the rights of children, but lifting anonymity would not only reduce the number of donors, but also of donations, which would directly affect private assisted reproduction centers with the resulting economic problems. So, ignoring economic value as a moral value means also ignoring the good it does for maintaining a fair society. So, to sum up, in conclusion, following the bioethical deliberation mentioned above, and after having examined the main values that become part of the two stream courses, anonymity of the donation against its suppression, the best intermediate course would be the one that tried to safeguard the greater number of values involved, namely, donor-conceived individuals are morally entitled to access general, non-identifying information about their origin. In this way, both donor-conceived people's rights to private life, identity, and family, and donors' rights to privacy may be recognized and balanced. And in the end, I wonder, what are the benefits knowing the identity of the donor? So, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I'm here now. Thank you so much, Dr. Rocío, for that great presentation. And thank you, everybody, for your patience while we were getting the presentation up and running. So I hope you all made yourself a cup of tea. So thank you for that. That was very interesting. And I do see that we have some questions that have come through. So we'll go straight over to asking the questions. So I think I click on, I'm just getting used to the finding the question. Oh, there we go. Right, I think I'm at the first one. So that'll come up on the screen. So Saya, sorry if I did, I probably didn't say that right. Please, how do you deal with unknown medical history of the donor if it comes up in my child in the future, if the donor is anonymous? Thanks.
Hi, Saya. Thank you for your question. And as I explained before, even the donor is anonymous, the recipient and the patient could know all about the medical history of the donor. And in Spain, it's mandatory to know the history of the donor, and this is available for the patients. So in this case, even it's anonymous, and the children don't know the identity of the donor, they can be access to the medical history.
Okay, thank you. I hope that's answered your question, Say. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so our next question we have is coming up from Regina. What age should you consider egg donation?
Hi, Regina. You say egg donation for the donor or for the recipient? If it's for the donor, it's under 35 years old. And in fact, the donors that we have, they are under 30 years old. But regarding the patients, depend on the diagnosis, because egg donation is not choose because the age or because it's because the ovarian reserve. So we have patients with 40 years old that they need egg donation, and we have a patient with 45, or even if they have a menopausia with 30 years old, then they need egg donation. So don't depend of the age, depend of the ovarian reserve.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that's answered your question. And next question coming up. So this is quite a long one from Christina. Myself and my partner are wondering which would be better, tell the child about the donor or not to tell. We both think that we should not. However, I hear most people would tell. What is the chance the child will find out later by any tests, for example? Also, can you see pictures of donor if it is non-anonymous? Thank you. And thanks, Christina, for your question.
Thank you, Christina, for your question. It's very interesting. And in Spain, you can't see picture of the donor. It's not anonymous totally. And what's best, to tell or not to tell? In my opinion, my personal opinion, I think it's important to tell the child what is their origin. And this is not incompatible, as I explained, with no identified donor. So I think what is the chance that we'll find the donor? Well, there are some scientifics that they think it's very easy in a very near future to know what's our origin, only to send a sample or with something very, very small, and we can know what is our genealogical origin. So I think it's better to tell the child that the origin is by a donor, but this is a very, very, I think it's very personal. It depends on a lot of things in the family. So depending your case, what's your opinion? I said my personal opinion is to tell the truth, but I think this is not necessary to identify the donor.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before we go to the next question, just I have a question on this kind of topic. When, because I don't remember much about when I was going through this. I think we all kind of forget some parts of it. When a couple or a single woman is coming to the clinic in Spain, inquiring about egg donation, what sort of counselling do they have on the side of to tell the child or not to tell the child? How many sessions do they have? Is it mandatory?
I think depend on the clinics, but in general, the psychologists in general, all of them are completely agree with reveal the origin child. The gynecologists depend on the family, are depend on some characteristic, but in general, I think almost everybody thinks the same as me, that the best is to tell the child the origin, but it's not necessary to reveal this identity, because it's not this is not necessary, you know. But in general, they think the same. And because as I explained before, in the future, in a very, very near future, we will see all our genetic characteristic very easy. In England is working Joyce Harpy with this topic, and she wrote several books about this, and she has been working in the genetic field, and she published a paper explaining that now, even nowadays, is easy to know what is the origin, and it's worse for a child to know the origin in other place, not in the family. So I think it's better to tell him or her.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate you answering my question as well. So our next question is just coming up, and this is from Becky. Thank you. She says, those stats, obviously from the presentation, really surprise me, especially now there is more of a trend towards openness, and research is suggesting that openness is best, as well as donor-conceived adults saying they would want to know.
Yes, but this is probably the key of this question, and for that I explained that it's an ethical issue more than clinical or legal, and the openness, I think, is more to explain what is the origin, but who to know what's the identity of the donor. I think because the donor, this is not the mother or father. The family is the family where the child's growing up, and for that I don't think so. It's openness to reveal the identity of the donor. So, but Becky, I think this is what you think about the future of the child, you know?
Yeah. Okay. I hope that's answered your question, Becky. Our next question is just coming up. And this is from Hayley. And Hayley says, I think modern day commercial DNA testing, Ancestry, 23andMe, means that anonymity of donors is no longer a realistic promise by clinics. And you did touch on that in your presentation.
Yes, Halle, yes. This that I explained now, because with this test now, and as you say, in a longer future, it's not a promise by clinics, but I think children, or in the future adults, they must choose what they want to know, the donor or no. But I think in the most of the cases they want know the donor, because they don't apport anything to this family or the health or anything. But I agree with you, Halle, with this idea.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Hayley, for asking that. And thank you for your answer, Dr. Rocío. Okay. Our next question is, oh, I've jumped over a couple. 2 seconds. What was this one? Freddie says this was incredible and very clarifying. So glad you found that helpful, Freddie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Freddie. Thank you very much.
Okay, and the next question is, oh, let's publish that one. Okay, and this is from Hayley. Thank you, Hayley, again. As a donor-conceived adult from an anonymous sperm donor who was not told from birth about my origin, I would argue that I should have been told. I also feel that it is my right as a human being to have the identity of my genetic parent. Have you spoken to any donor-conceived adults about how they feel?
Unfortunately, no, Halle, because as you know, if in Spain is anonymous, the donation, sperm or eggs is anonymous. No children have this right, and they don't know what is the origin. This is one of the most difficult topics to discuss, because we don't know what the children or the adults in the future will think about this. But I agree with, I don't know if in some cases, because it depends, as I explained, depend on the family, depend on the person. But in some cases, I think it could be worse to know not the origin, but to know what is the donor. And I think you say that it's a right as a human being to have the identity of the genetic parent, but you know what is the identity of the genetic parent, but a genetic identity, no an identity to know personally, or to know as if he were other parent. So I think they are different things. I think the right to know what is the identity is, I totally agree. But to know personally, I don't know that this is have benefits.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Rocío, for your thoughts on that. If you do have a question and you haven't asked it yet, please do ask away. We do have some more questions that we've got to go through, and I've just seen yours from earlier, Virginia. Thank you. Yes, we said for the patient that was the age of the when you need X. Thank you for that. So I'm just getting used to where everything is on this on this webinar. So our next question is from Yale. I would be interested to know what constitutes the general information that you mention in your conclusion, please.
Yes, general information is everything about the health, about the medical information, about the data, the phenotypical characteristic of the donor, and almost everything except the identity. And the identity, for example, you know, there are some banks, about all the sperm banks, that they offer what is the hobbies, or what are the studies of the donors, and they don't offer this kind of information. But everything about the medical, health, and phenotypical information about the donor.
Okay, I hope that's answered your question, Yael. And we have another question here. Oh, sorry, this is what I clicked on. There we go. It's coming up. Okay, and thank you, Becky. Another question from Becky. As a mum through egg donation, I just want to share that telling was a very scary prospect at first, but now they're here, that's obviously her children, my fears have lessened, and I know it's the right thing to be truthful about their origins. I also now wish to be able to give them more information about the donor if they ask, whereas before I was more comfortable with anonymous. Personally, I feel that open ID at 18 is a good option to provide some anonymity, but to allow rights to the children too. Is this something that Spain might consider?
Well, in Spain, as you know, if it's anonymous donation, we don't consider it too open about the identity about the donor. But if parents who consider to reveal the origin to the child, the psychologist advise that the children is the best way is to reveal through 3 to 5 years old, not to wait until 18. For child is it's good to normalize the situation since they are the children, and not to wait until 18, because they think it's too old to know the truth. So if parents thinks to reveal the origin to child, is preferable to do it before 5 years old.
Great. Okay. Yes. Thank you. And yes, like Becky, my daughter knows. We told her, and Yes, but there's lots of useful books that people can use to read to their children when they're babies, and often those books do become bedtime favourites, which is really nice. And Virginia says, "Oh, thank you. That was
thank you to you.
this question. Thank you, Virginia." Okay, the next question from Ashley. Most donors are young, haven't had medical issues come up, or they haven't started those having any medical conditions such as cancer, etc. Those things happening later in life could affect the child's health, obviously born, I guess, through being a donor. Is there any way to have a donor contract that says medical history should be updated over time, even if it is anonymous? Thank you, Ashley. It's a great question.
Yes, Ashley, it's a very interesting question because I have not commented this. So the law say that if children need to locate the donor in the future because of cancer or because they need a transplant or whatever, it's possible, and the law allows us to locate the donor. But as I also explained, we have a DNA bank for these cases of this is necessary to have this genetic material from the donor. But in special cases, it's possible to locate the donor and to know what's the identity to help the children. So even it's anonymous. So this is possible.
Okay, so somebody would contact the clinic, would they, if that was the case?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ashley. I hope that's answered your question. Christina says thank you. That was for her question earlier. You're welcome. And Christina's asking another question. What if the child will insist that they want to find out their bio mother, so the donor?
Well, in Spain, we don't have this problem because if we say the doctor that the law don't allow to locate the donor, it's by law. In other countries, I don't know, but I think if parents explain to children what's the situation, because there are other problems. Some people are with that egg donation is similar to adoption, but it's not at all similar. This is completely different. So in these cases, when the mother have a baby back by egg donation, the baby from the beginning feel that the mother is the mother, not other person who put the eggs in what moment. So to know the donor is only for curiosity. It's not the same as in the case of adoption. So the parents, I think they should explain the babies or the children that curiosity, this is not a very justifiable necessity. So I don't know, but I think it is very complicated if the child insists to know because I don't. The idea of bio mother, I don't agree with this with this word, because the mother is the mother who was pregnant and who take care for the child. The other is only the donor, you know. So well.
Yes, that's the different terminology is still being decided, isn't it? Really. Okay, and our next question. Thank you, Christina, for that question. And Becky's asking, do you think clinics should provide more support to patients to help them with talking and telling to encourage and support disclosure?
I completely agree with you, Becky. Completely agree. Maybe there are necessity to find more support, more psychological support with the patients, and explain not only about the treatment, not only about the medical support, but also psychological, and about the future, about the several topics that the most of the times doctors forget. So I completely agree with you, Becky. Yes.
And I think also when you're at the stage of going to a clinic and you're not yet a parent through donor conception, when you have the child, when you have your child and that child is growing up, your whole feelings around everything change as well, don't they? I think
Yeah,
I'm sure you would agree with me on that.
Yes,
Okay,
I try to speak with patients about this question a lot, because not only about all the process, but because the process, the most of the patient already know, because in internet and now there exists a lot of information about the egg donation. So, but there are not information about the several things that they are not in the network, or so I think it's very important to speak and to inform and to spend as much as possible the time with the patients, explain a lot of things. I think it's very important.
great. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you, Doctor. And we have Sei, who says thank you. They asked a question earlier. And our next question from Hayley: if the doctor would ever like to discuss these issues with someone who is donor conceived like myself, then I welcome a discussion. So thank you, Hayley. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Another question's just popped in. I was just going to say that's it for now. And Hayley says, for anyone listening to this, I would urge them to research what donor conceived people think, not just the medical practitioners. And Hayley, if you remember earlier, is a donor conceived person herself. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true, Hayley.
Okay. Right, I think that is the last of the questions, but if anyone has a question they really want to ask, then please feel free. I just have a quick question actually that I thought of when someone was asking one before. Are the donors themselves during their counselling, because you said they have counselling, I think I heard that. Is it explained to them that a child who is born through their donation could actually contact them in the future because of the DNA testing, the Ancestry and 23andMe? Do donors get told that information, that they could, even though the donor themselves hasn't put their DNA onto 23andMe, for example, that a relative of theirs could have done, and a donor conceived child could actually contact the donor? Are the donors told of that, or are they aware of that?
I don't think so. We inform the donors about this possibility. I don't think so, no, because it's very, here, because the law is this way, and because we have by law, we own the possibility to have a lot of children by donor is not possible. Only 6 pregnancies by donor, but we don't inform about this to the donors. No.
Okay. I just wondered because it's obviously quite a topical thing that's spoken about in the community here. Okay, and Ads, who has been listening, says thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. That is all of our questions this evening. So just to finish up to say thank you so much for joining us and thank you for your great questions. If you didn't want to ask a question or you think of one afterwards, then as we said, Dr. Rocío and her team can always be contacted at UR Vistahermosa. We do have more events coming up through my IVF answers. The next one will be next Tuesday on May the 24th at the same time as this, and it's on Is My Endometrium Well Prepared for an Embryo Transfer? And that's with Dr. Ana Santiago, the fertility specialist at Clínica Tambray. So if you haven't signed up for that one or future ones, please go ahead where you usually do and to sign up for future events. So that just brings me, I'm just checking, no last questions. I don't want to leave anyone wanting. So that just leaves me to say thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much, Dr. Rocío, for your presentation tonight and for coming back to us when we lost you.
Sorry, but the connection was terrible.
No, these things. Technology is lovely, isn't it? But it does sometimes let us down. Is there anything you wanted to say at the very end to anybody?
Somebody wrote that it is possible to share the slides, but it's recorded the webinar, isn't it?
Yes, the webinar is recorded, and I think it's available later on tonight or tomorrow morning. But yes, it's the recording button has been going all the way through, so you're welcome to pop back and have another listen. So, well, that's great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your evening or your morning if you're many hours ahead of us. And we hope to see you again here soon. So thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you very much, Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.